Welcome back. Tomorrow begins Guru Purnima, which is a holiday celebrating teachers everywhere, but especially, of course, spiritual teachers who answer ultimate questions about life and meaning. And so I thought I would talk about my guru, Ashok Singh. And somebody recently asked me if I could boil down everything that he taught me. And I couldn't boil it down to one thing, but I could boil it down to three. So I want to share those with you today. And it's going to get into the meaning, the true meaning of what the spiritual teacher is to you in your spiritual journey. So let's get into it. I think when I look over my relationship with my teacher, my meditation teacher, my kriya teacher, the one thing that sticks out to me the most is the teaching of bliss. And this is something which I think is sorely lacking in a lot of other systems where they are dedicated to technique, or they are dedicated to energy, or they're dedicated to a feeling. In this case, we are dedicated to an experience of bliss in the nervous system and in the brain. And so I wrote to him one time, and I'm like, I'm getting this bliss and I'm getting this bliss. And I had listed out about five different kinds of experience of bliss to him. And he just laughed and he said, "So you're getting lots of bliss. This is good." I thought that was so great. But I eventually brought it down to two categories: that we can have bliss that we feel inside of the body, and we can have a supernal bliss, which is not in any locality. It's just everywhere, and it's potentially very overwhelming. I mean, incapacitating to the point that you won't get up, you won't get out of bed, you can't do anything. You couldn't. It's very hard to function when that level of bliss is washing over you. So that's the very big bliss. I have a training on it, and I talk about that experience of that bliss and what it's like, and how we can potentially reach into ourselves to experience that for the first time. But I talked about this on another video. Something that was very surprising to me is that he didn't have any care about my energetic experiences. They were good, they were okay, but he didn't really care about them. He was much more interested in me getting to bliss, getting to an experience of bliss, whether it's in the body or it's the supernal bliss, just an experience of bliss, because that will head you in the correct direction. And so I wrote him about energetic feelings that I was getting in my practice of kriya meditation. And he's like, yeah. Tell me when you get to the bliss. But I'm like, no, it's a big deal. It's this and this. Isn't this big? Isn't this what? Am I doing it correctly? He's like, yes, but concentrate towards bliss. Look for the bliss behind the energy. And when you look at the theory of koshas in yogic theory, which is that you have a physical body that's encasing a energetic body, and inside that energetic body there is a bliss body. And so now you're closer to the truth, right? We begin with the physical, we go to the energy, and inside the energy is the bliss. And that's what he was pointing me towards. He's pointing me towards that deeper experience in meditation. The second thing that he talked about constantly was the practice of Om Japa in the chakras. And when I say chakras, I mean six. I mean from the coccyx to the sacrum, to the lumbar, to the dorsal, to the cervical, to the medulla. Those six chakras. Those are the ones that we can breathe through. And just to reiterate, Lahiri Mashaya's rule for Kriya Yogis was you do not breathe through the brain. So you can visualize in the brain, you can experience something inside of the brain, you can feel inside of the brain, but please don't breathe through the brain. So what does that mean? Well, in a lot of energy healing systems, they will talk about breathing through one part of the body. For example, you might breathe through your hand. So I'm imagining I'm pushing energy with my breath through my hand. And I could imagine any point in my body, I'm going to push energy through it, like my shoulder, okay? I'm going to push energy through my shoulder. And I'm just feeling as if my breath is pushing through this shoulder. You see? That's how you push energy through the body. And we're doing a slightly different variation of that in Kriya Yoga. We are breathing and we are practicing Om Japa in each of the 6 chakras. Not the brain, but the 6 chakras. And that was Lahiri Baba's rule. He said, don't breathe through the brain. Now, I put this out on YouTube. I've made it public. And since then, I've gotten a lot of feedback from different shamanic systems, from Taoism, from shamanism, from this system and that system. They all say, oh yeah, we were always told, never breathe through the brain. You have to be a little bit gentle with your brain. It's not this thing that you can roll down the road. You know, it's something delicate. And so we want to treat it a little kind. And so that's why this rule, because it can compound your problems. And we want to compound your bliss instead of compounding your problems. And so that's why Lahiri Baba had this rule. Don't breathe through the brain. Getting back to Ashokji, he always talked about Om Japa in each of the 6 chakras. And the cleaning effect. And that's the feeling that the yogi gets. You practice this Om Japa into the chakras. We've got a brain. So the science of this is you've got a brain. It doesn't have anywhere to put these feelings. And so it projects it through the central nervous system down into the body. And, something happens. The brain says, this doesn't feel right. It projects that down, for example, into the heart. And you go, I feel hurt in my heart. You don't feel it over here or over here. You feel it in your heart. It was projected from your brain down into the heart. You say, I feel hurt in my heart. Well, if we were to feel that in our heart and then Om into it, it would dissipate the feeling. Maybe not immediately, but you're going to see it lessen immediately. It's going to notch down each time you Om into it. So any feeling, any negative feeling that I feel inside of the body, it's a wonderful opportunity to practice Oming through with the breath into that feeling and see what it does to wipe it out. And that's what we're really doing. We're wiping out everything which is negative. We're causing a separation from the body. We're causing a disassociation, because these chakras are how we groove, we sync with the world around us. And so we're reversing that process. We're going back. We're reverting back towards the brain through this process of Om into the chakra. And he just was on and on about that. He's got, and I loved it. He it didn't make sense at first, but with a little bit of coaching, it all became very clear. And it's, when you dive into it, it's extremely profound, because we're getting into how the brain operates in connection with the body. So this mind and body connection, how does that work? And how do I disassociate so I can go into the brain and go into a very low idle state and into a very deep meditative calmness, a very deep meditative mellow, where I can really begin to see things clearly. Isn't that wonderful? So that was the glory of this constant talk about cleaning your chakras. You're wiping out that problem that we have, that continuous lockup and story that we have with our chakras and our body and everything that's going on. We're just locked in it. And Om Japa in the chakra, it's such a crazy thing. It gives us this opportunity to disengage for a moment and to just kind of pull back and reassess and recalibrate into the brain. And that's what gives us that clarity. That's what gives us that feeling of, oh my God, for the first time I feel clean. How is that possible? that's a really beautiful sign that the Om japa in the chakra is affecting you correctly. And your kriya practice is correct because you're getting that clean feeling through each of the chakras. Really beautiful. Such a beautiful thing. The third thing, if I had to boil down all of his teachings to three things, the third thing I would say is the medulla. He talked about the medulla constantly. The medulla, the medulla, the medulla. And you see on my channel, what do I talk about? The medulla, the medulla, the medulla. And it has to do with the medulla is responsible in the body for regulating the heart rate, which also regulates the breath rate. And so this is a very important point for the yogi. And the kriya technique, I have said before, it's medulla centric, meaning that it uses the medulla over and over again. It rotates again and again with using the medulla. And so even just resting your mind on the medulla. So how can you do that? You first you got to feel it. So a really good way to feel the medulla is just turn your head back and forth and imagine that your neck is a tiny little screw in the base of the skull, and you'll feel that when you turn your head slightly, not big, just ever so slightly back and forth. Feel that screw as it goes into the brain, and it's almost ecstatic. If you really feel into it, it's just or it might give you the feeling of oh, I think I'm home. So that's the feeling of that screw going into the skull, that little point, which is the medulla. And one of the reasons it feels so good is that as soon as you put your attention on it, it's lowering the heart rate just a fraction, just enough that you feel, oh, that's nice. Just enough. That's all it takes. So just resting your mind there is a beautiful thing. And so what happens to the yogi, and I talk about this in the Big Bliss training, the consciousness is released from the body through the process of this cleaning, this Om Japa. It just kind of rises back to the brain. And I call that the roll-up effect, right? Because it's almost like a roller shade. You pull it down and you let it go, and it just... That's when it happens really powerfully. You just get sucked right up into the brain. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So it might feel like a rocket. It might feel like a roller shade. It might feel like a vacuum sucking you up. There's all these possibilities for an absorption feeling. But the point is you're getting pulled up into the brain. And now we're really in the medulla, aren't we? We're not just putting our mind there. We're actually, our consciousness is getting pulled up into it. So it's really, really powerful. And now, because of this, and because of the freeze response, and because of the tranquil breath, these three things coming together, the body awareness begins to dim radically. And so you could point yourself to the body. It's still kind of there. It's kind of shadow-like, or it might feel like it's misaligned, like your head's over here and your body's over here, there's all these strange feelings that come up in the process of interiorization. The body becoming very numb or shadow-like, or like it's on a dimmer switch and it's dimming out, or it's just not there. It's just not in your perception. You could turn back to it, but why do that? You're having a nice meditation. Just enjoy it. Enjoy that freedom of the mind to lift up above the body, right? And so that's what's happening in this process of getting pulled up into the medulla. And so by holding your attention there, it is helping to foster that roll up into the brain and that deep, deep silence of the body input, the body, the constant body reminder, the five senses telling you all of this stuff, right? It's dimmed radically, like a dimmer switch in your kitchen where you dim the light, you turn it down and it goes down, 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 down. That's exactly what it's like. Or it might dim right out very quickly. Every experience is a little bit different, but the point is it's dimming out. And so now you're in a very, very deep silence. And Ashokji told me this is where we Google God. Isn't that a wonderful way to put it? a nice modern way to put it. This is where we Google God. And I just love this. So this is where your questions get answered, because you're right on the edge before the non-dual state, before a complete absorption and samadhi. You're right on the edge of that. All right. You've got the freeze response. You've got the tranquil breath. You're rolling up into the brain. Everything is dimmed out. Maybe you're sitting there in front of the spiritual eye, and that's your whole world. Just the darkness and the spiritual eye, and the body is gone, and the breath is dimmed out because it's in the tranquil breath, right? So everything has become very, very quiet. And because of that, your power of concentration, keeping on the spiritual eye, keeping on silence, is very, very powerful. Your ability to hold that is very, very powerful. And all of that is activating the right hippocampus of the brain. And so now we're right on the edge of entering into that experience, entering into the non-dual state, where we have a union with something very powerful, very primordial, very divine, our higher self. So just before that non-dual state, or right after that non-dual state, there's a communication that takes place between the two hemispheres of the brain, back and forth. So any question that you held in the left brain will get answered by the right brain when you're in this on the edge state. And that's what causes the download phase. That's what causes the ability to Google God. And what is so beautiful about this is you hear in yogic circles about being at the feet of the guru. Well, the true guru, Ashokji told me, is this inner experience where you bring a question, maybe something that's been in your heart for a while, or something that's gnawed at your brain or your gut for a while. You're wondering this question. You bring it. And when you're in this state, you are at the true feet of the true guru. Inside of you, it's an internal experience. It is not an external experience. So I had a guru, Ashok Singh, but the real guru is the one that I meet inside that answers my questions directly, not with an intermediary, but directly. That is the true experience. And that's what the real teacher's role is, to introduce you to that experience when you're on the edge and your questions get answered. Now, of course, we want to go into the non-dual state. In the non-dual state, you're not going to have questions answered. You're going to have a divine experience of union. And so there's no room for questions and answers when you're in a union, right? You're just there. But as you're coming out, or as you're going in, you have this ability to sit at the feet of the true teacher inside of you and have your questions asked. And so whenever you see an image, like you might see this weekend on this holiday, whenever you see an image of the teacher and the student, always remember it's an internal experience, and it's taking place in the medulla. That's how the yogi describes it. It's taking place in the medulla. It's actually taking place on the edge of the right hippocampus, this connection with the right hippocampus. But where the yogi may experience it is in the medulla. So I hope you love this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of you next time.